right, hello everybody. Hopefully you can hear me well. So we're going to be talking about mobile payments again, similar to the last conversation that we had. We're going to be talking primarily around MPoC, our standard for mobile payments on COTS. I have a great panel with me here who are going to help me with that discussion. And what I'd like to do is ask you to introduce yourselves, so please.
Hi everyone, I'm Sami Alamri from NearPay. I would like to introduce myself as a software engineer, somebody who've dabbled with MPoC since the first draft.
Hello everyone, I'm Priyanka. I manage the business for Yazara payments for the APAC region, and yeah, today I'm here. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm CTO of SoftSpace. So I basically take care of all the technology roadmaps and, of course, the most important one, including the MPoC roadmap.
Excellent, thank you. So let's start with, the panels introduced themselves a little bit, but let's get a little bit more information here. What was your first job in the payment industry, and what's it like now compared to when you first started? So, Sami.
Wow, are we going to talk about promotions now? So, as I said, I introduced myself as a software engineer because the first thing I did was backend. I worked on Node, and today I work in R&D, and mostly I try to make most of the PCI standards into a proof of concept. So it's a big difference.
Big different.
Yeah, difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I worked with HDFC Bank, and I was managing the retail CASA, where it was pure business from consumer point of view, the retail product point of view. Now, over the period of like 15, 16 years, I am into solution selling. And I think solution selling is something which I like more than the retail sales. So yeah, I'm really nice and glad to be here, what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I think I'm the oldest here. Yeah, I start as a terminal programmer.
Wow.
During my time, I think I still have to deal with like manual imprinter. Many of you doesn't know, right? It's like putting your cards on a carbon paper on top and do that satisfying zigzag kinds of motions. Call the bank, pass the phone to the customer, get the authorization code and write down. That's where I start. And I think today we are talking about MPoC now, the whole acceptance going into the mobile devices, COTS devices. So really give me a feeling like we started on almost no security consideration at all to securing a device, like PTS device, and now it looks like we are going into securing a whole ecosystem.
It's certainly changed a lot since the old zip-zap machines. I remember those as well. I think we're of an age, unfortunately. So I'm going to stick with you for a second there, Nick. You mentioned terminals, and so do you think the future, if we look 5, 10 years down the track, do you think the future is going to be one where mobile payment acceptance solutions coexist with traditional payment terminals, or is kind of one of these acceptance methods going to win, so to speak, over another? Do they coexist, or does one take over?
Yeah, I think they're going to coexist and complement each other. So what happens now that when we have a MPoC solutions for the merchants is really around accessibility. So what accessibility means here is really an options to choose what fit me the most, right, from a merchant point of view. So we have PTS device terminal that is single purpose for payments, and there are a lot of situations that we would need that, like heavy loads transactions, and I'm expecting on back-to-back transactions. I want it to be never fail, so I'll go with that. But if I needed a bit more options when I talk about open system, where I'm not just taking payments, I have other things like today we've been dealing with loyalties, today we've been dealing with the QR and things like that. I would go for MPoC solutions because that's more suitable.
Okay, does anybody have a different point of view of that, or similar?
I absolutely agree with his point that it has to be a coexistence between both the hardware, old traditional POS terminals, and the new generation MPoC solutions, because they both have different use cases and they complement each other very well. The hardware terminals are basically a very good use cases in case of where it's a fixed cash counter, or the large merchant where they need to have large volume based transactions. Whereas if we are talking about mobile based payment systems, or the MPoC based systems are more useful in case of mobility, where the flexibility is required, immediate and temporary setup is required. So they both are like caters to two different use cases, and I think they both together complements each other a lot. So it has to be like together. We should not think of an idea of winning over each other. So it should be a coexistence.
Okay. Sami, what's your opinion on this?
I would have to disagree.
Ooh, okay. What do you
Yeah.
think?
You gotta spice up the whole conversation, right? So what I believe is that soft POS application have no limit,
Okay.
right? So we're talking about a software here. And I think in a few years from now, soft POS will take over. Easily because you can integrate, let's talk about the MPoC SDK for a second. So with an SDK, you can integrate into any system, into any hardware. Why would you limit yourself with the terminal POS, like the normal hard POS, right? Why would you limit yourself there? So for ECRs, you just brought that point. We have a client that is integrating the MPoC SDK inside their ECR. It's their own system. Only the payment screen will show up when you need to pay. So just taking that example, I think in a few years from now, with more adaptation, people will forget about terminals.
Interesting. So Priyanka mentioned there's some scenarios where she felt that MPOS was more suitable and terminals were more suitable in others. You don't feel that's the case? You don't feel there's like this sort of scenario, for example, high throughput, multi-lane checkouts might be more suitable to terminals? Do you think MPOS still has a future in that context?
I sincerely believe that a soft POS can do everything a normal terminal can do and more.
There you go. Everything it can do and more.
Yes.
Okay. Nick, what do you think of, like, is there any specific contexts where you think a terminal might be better than MPOS?
I think like what you have mentioned rightfully is the heavy loads multi-lane scenarios, but not to say that it is not entirely possible for MPoC to have a play there, but that would also mean that a lot of components have to come together. Like today we are relying on whether just a consumer COTS or more enterprise level COTS, but if you're talking about the qualities, things like your battery lives, your reliabilities, there may still be a gap. And if you're talking about standards versus PTS today, there may still be a gap as well. So that would mean that a lot more works that we need to do in order to bring MPoC to a stage where it is able to, parallelly runs or even taking over the terminals. And the questions would be, is it something that is commercially viable to do it? And the effort that we put in and looking at the ROI that we're going to get, is it something that we want to do it or and the community itself wanted to do it?
Okay. So let's look at this from a slightly different point of view then. Are there regions that are more open to the use of this type of technology of mobile acceptance than other regions that might be more kind of focused on traditional payment terminals? What do you think, Priyanka?
So I think it's both. The regions also, because regions have different culture, the different dynamics, the different ecosystem, like countries, China and India, they are heavily accepting the mobile payments, whether it is QR, whether it is UPI. So everything is on mobile-based payments. At the same time, there are various countries which are quite mature from contactless penetration point of view, whether it is contactless card issuance, whether it is mobile wallet-based acceptance. So, for example, UK, Australia, and most part of Europe are like fully, mature in terms of contactless penetration. So it adds both the location, the country, both equally, I think, is important for having this kind of solutions in the market.
Okay, interesting. So what do you think, Sami? Are the regions which, would, from your point of view, from your experience, that are more open and accepting to mobile payments than others, or is it just a global trend?
Well, I want to claim that I'm an expert in this subject, but from what I've seen in Saudi, we have 90% contactless payment happening, 90% of the whole ecosystem. So it was easier for us to start marketing soft POS. It was easier for most merchants to adapt it because they can see the application and the availability of contactless cards everywhere. while we had some problems with other countries because they were still heavily relying on Magstripe. So I think what Priyanka said is definitely correct because it depends on how is the infrastructure in the country or in the region itself. So yes, some regions are different than others.
Okay, interesting. And I'll come to you as well, Nick, but I'm going to kind of add to the question a little bit as well in the context of where we're at the moment, obviously in Asia. And to Priyanka's point, you know, you've got QR codes, you've got dedicated mobile kind of payments. Does that make Asia kind of more open to this sort of thing in terms of mobile payment with card-based instruments? Or does that complicate things because there are different channels, different payment methods?
Yeah, I think it's very confusing rather than complicating. So one thing that really happens in Asia is that we are actually pampered with choices on how we want to pay. And you have QR, you have cards, and you have card not present going to e-com channels. So with all these options, one may choose the preference over the other. And more importantly, I think one of the things that is, to me, is like a gap where education and awareness to the cardholders, to the consumer, is just not enough. I mean, just to share a story that I was trying to purchase new clothes like once a year kind of things in a I wouldn't say it's a globally international brand, but it's at least a regional chain, right? So I went into the store, get my clothes, and I'm ready to pay. The POS terminal was there, and I take out my cards and try to tap. But the cashier just tell me that, no, can I have your cards? We have to insert, we have to debit. So I say, no way, I'm just going to tap it. And I wasn't allowed, and well, I still have to get my clothes, right, for Chinese New Year. So I surrendered. But I did ask the questions that why this happens, and to my amaze that the cashier was telling me, no, my boss just tell me that tapping card is not secure, so we can't use it.
Interesting. Yeah. I've had that experience as well myself in Australia where people have had, I would say, incorrect points of view about the security of certain payment instruments. So it is interesting that that happens.
If I can add a point
Of course.
here, I believe that it's also a responsibility of the schemes and the regulatory bodies like you to educate the merchants, educate the acquirers more on how the solution is, you know, now more secure after coming this MPoC, especially for non-trusted devices, like having your own phone for the payment acceptance. So it is also, apart from the solution providers like us, it's also your responsibility and maybe your help which will be required to develop the entire ecosystem so that everybody is aware that this can be used and it is not very, you know, unsecured. So I think we all should work together as developing the entire ecosystem, making them aware what all new features which are coming in. And these are like pretty secured, and we have like quite tight certification processes which are involved. So I think that should help.
Yes, and that's certainly the intent for the MPoC standard, to provide a robust security evaluation process so that you can know that something that is listed is secure. But to those points then, people do have sometimes concerns about using a non-dedicated payment system, like somebody else's mobile phone, for instance, for accepting payments. How do you address such concerns? How do you get past that? And obviously, just general industry training and knowledge is one aspect, but are there other ways that we can help inform people that this is a secure way to pay? So Sami, do you find that's a problem, or it's not really an issue at all?
Actually, it's not an issue that we face, but if we're talking about educating the public, then we should also educate them about the platform and the type of security that exists today and keep on developing. Like, phones today are way more secure than they were 10 years ago. We just heard the last talk, we just heard about TAE and secure elements, and this is one of the main reasons why I believe SoftPS has no limit. Like, it could go beyond just because of that.
Okay. So any other points of view? Like, is it a concern? I mean, I've certainly heard, I've been working in this space for a long time, and I've heard people express, I wouldn't want to enter my PIN on somebody else's mobile phone. But is that purely anecdotal? Is there evidence of that concern in the market?
Yeah, I may top up. I think that it's a real concern in the markets that I've been in. But the concern is not too much about under the hood, what is the technology, what kind of securities that we possess. It's just a habitual things that I used to see something like that I didn't secure, that I can pay with. But now, hey, this is your personal phone. How can I trust it, right? So I don't know what you're going to do with it after you close your shops and things like that. So what really happens is that we may think about creating some things that is more familiar for the cardholders, because education takes time. So for them to change overnight is going to be tough. So if we create some things that, I mean, in the markets we see that there are really open Android system that looks like a terminals, there is receipt carbon paper printed out. So those would be the good steps, at least from my point of view, to introduce MPoC to the merchants, to the cardholders. And when they get used to it and more information flows in, then naturally it transforms into a different form factors that is easily acceptable.
Yep. Okay. Priyanka, do you have
Yeah, I
a
would like to add here because I manage the APAC region and I work very closely with the neighboring countries from India like Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. These are like not fully, mature in terms of contactless, and they are in the journey of, from cash-based economy to cashless and contactless-based journey. So I get this question quite often that, is it safe to use, merchants' devices? So we have been explaining them that after the MPoC came into picture, so the solution becomes more secure, even if you want to enter your PIN. On the merchant's devices, it is secured because there are a lot of, multi-layer security points which are there, which we have been doing regular checks. And in case if the device, the non-trusted device, basically the consumer's device, if it is under any attack, so we get a real-time alert that this device has been compromised. So either it gets, immediately logged out, or the application is killed, or it is completely shut down. So we have these kind of, mechanism to prevent such kind of issues. So yes, we have been getting these kind of questions. And I think now we are in the process, maybe in a couple of years, they will be fully confident to use these kind of devices, without any fear of getting compromised.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned, Sami, the fact that mobile security has been advancing, rapidly. We get, pretty much a major mobile operating system release every year. Every year, that doesn't just add new functionality, it adds new security features, and things advance in the software layer, in the hardware layer, on the phones, and so forth. What aspects do you feel have added to the security of being able to accept payments on mobile phones? And what do you think is coming, or what do you know is coming down the path, and like future versions of operating systems that you're looking forward to that can make your product more secure?
This takes me back to documentation by Google. Hope it's okay that I'm talking about them.
Sure.
So the way Android have been developing further and further, I've noticed that there was some documentation about isolated process, and I think Google is developing an API specifically for isolated processes. So we dabbled with it a little bit, like we tested the API. We realized that some normal capability and security features are not reachable from using that API. But I hope that with time, it will open up further and it will develop more.
Is that the Android virtualization framework?
I think it was. I forgot the name. That's why I didn't want to bring it up. I forgot the name of the documentation. But I remember we weren't able to reach like the key store, for example, from inside the process, which is a very important aspect of an MPoC solution. So just looking back at it, I think maybe with time it will become more common and will develop further as a documentation and even as an API.
Okay, interesting. Any points of view from the other side of the table there?
No difference. I really like that because I tried it as well during the, I think it's like a beta time. So one of the things that I think really works well for all of us here in the payment industry is that if that particular ideas can be turned into something that is usable easily. So think about, today we have some of the operating system that built on top of Androids. You would have what they call a private albums. So it's like a totally secure environment that you can't touch, right? So, but why can't that I have abilities from a developer point of view to develop applications on a native Android OS that would run on this environment. So it makes things a lot easier. And it's something that the phone holders or customer like me has used to. I know this part is secure, this is not secure. So if I run an app from here, it's good.
Yep.
Maybe access to the TEE. That would be good in the upcoming years. I think that will change the whole game of soft POS. It will make developing a more secure MPoC solution way easier than it is today.
Yep.
Right now, it's closed. So maybe in the upcoming years, more manufacturers will let us develop our own applets for like TEE and secure elements. At least open it up for payment developers.
Yeah, interesting. Priyanka, do you have any points of view on this?
No, I think I fully agree to both of them. I have just difference of opinion in terms of, with Sami especially, because backstage we were discussing about the various, authentication methods like biometric.
Yep.
And it has definitely advanced, and from last 5 to 10 years, the things have changed drastically. And the biometric is something which adds more credibility, makes it more secure in terms of using the personal devices, basically, the COTS devices, consumer off-the-shelf devices. So I think having it on biometric makes it more, secure, and rest, I think I agree to both of them.
Okay.
I am not too sure if he's very much into biometric, because he was like, no, I am not going to reveal my face.
I was just telling her that as a user, I might not go for it.
Really?
Yeah?
Say,
Why not?
I will not go for it.
Of course.
I don't want to give my data to everyone. Come on.
Okay, interesting. So I want to move on to an important question here, because there's probably people in the audience who are thinking of developing their own mobile payments acceptance solutions, technologies. They may be in the process or thinking about it, thinking about what they can do. So you've all been involved in this. You've all, gone through the processes of working with our MPoC standard and potentially standards before that. So what advice would you give to people in the audience who are new at this, who don't have your experience? How, what do you wish you could go back in time and tell yourself that, this is what you should be prepared for and this is information that you need to know? I think I'll start with you there, Nick.
Yeah, to me, it's very simple. Don't reinvent the wheel. Work with us. Because it's really, deep down, I think it's a lot of us from a software development point of view would have think that this is just an applications, a mobile applications, Androids, and the backend. So yeah, we can do it like, a couple of months. But I think most of us underestimate the certification process. So how do we work with the labs? How do we get certified? And we are not talking about just telling you that this is secure. Why? Because I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You're talking about evidence quality. So if you do not have the qualities of evidence to even support what you're saying, so you just have to scratch your heads and try to figure it out. And because it's new, it's not easy. Even today, we have MPoC 1.1,
Yep.
and it's still just giving you an idea of what are we looking at, what kind of security controls that we want, but it will never tell you exactly, you can do this, 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 and you are fine. So that's the part that you have to figure out yourself. And if you don't want to do that part of the things and just wanted to roll up your application fast, so that is where software vendors like us come into the pictures. And I believe there's the new standard support that as well on the 1.1 software part of the things, MPoC software. So that's really how I see it now. Collectively, we can make things faster, and we need to have these solutions, like MPoC solutions, out in the market to learn and to feedback to the standards, to the implementations, exactly what is happening and how can we improve it further.
I see you nodding there, Priyanka. Do you agree?
Yeah, I fully agree. In fact, if any one of you want to get into, these kind of solutions, so first, I think the suggestion would be to have your system architecture ready in place, finalize your scope of work, what exactly you want from application based, from the backend side. So if you have a clear requirement in place, then the solution providers like us, we can work together and we make it to the more simpler implementation and much faster go-to-market is something that we can help you with. Second is choose your partner very, very strategically. You should have a partner who are like subject matter expert, who know what they are going to do, who know what they are going to suggest. So that is something which I think is really important, where you should choose your partners very, very, carefully and strategically. Third is something that you all should also be ready, and in terms of the engaging the labs at a very early stage, if you want to have this. So if you are engaging with the MPoC certified labs at early stage, so you know if there is any security flaw which happens, so it can be immediately rectified and the process becomes much easier. So I think these are some of the factors which they should keep in mind.
Okay, Sami?
I'll keep it short, but I would say invest time and money in gaining the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and invest in attracting talents. I think that's one of the things that made us succeed at NearPay, that we spent the first year researching and developing as much as we can.
Yep.
We were reading CPOC. Eventually, we got pilot program, but still, it made the pilot program so much easier. Just trying to achieve something with a higher security and figuring out how to do that. I think that's it, to be honest.
Yeah, and so I think what I'm hearing is it's not just a simple matter of I know how to create an application on a mobile device, therefore I can create a payment application. We do have in MPoC version 1.1 the ability for SDKs to exist, for people to integrate that. So I think that's the partnership discussion that was going on there. We're getting to the end here, so what I'm going to do is I always like to finish off with some lightning round questions. So very quick, very short questions. Just once again to give a bit of a context of people. So what was your first mobile phone? So my one, I'm old enough to have had my original mobile phone. Wasn't quite a brick, but it still had an antenna that you had to screw in. So that's aging me a little bit here. But Nick, what was your first mobile phone?
Probably the same as you. I have a Motorola StarTech. Like your SIM card is a size of credit card, not from the phone.
Yeah, I remember those. Priyanka.
I saw this, I used this Nokia feature phone, which is extremely popular in India that time. Small feature phone. The only requirement for me was it should have the radio so that I can listen to music. So that's the only requirement, which that time I was looking for, apart from just making the call. So.
Yes. Do you remember when people actually used to use phones to make calls? Seems like people don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
They're not really phones anymore. Sami?
Yeah.
I used the Nokia, but the one that's closest to my heart was the Engage, if you remember that.
Oh, I do remember that.
Yeah, the Engage was marketed as
It had like a
gaming
weird
phone.
keyboard down the side or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, but sorry, we're geeking out over old phones here. I'll stop that now. So one last question, and on phones. And it's kind of related to MPoC in a little bit, foldables. So, a lot of new phones, a lot of the high-end phones these days are foldable. Is that like a fad? Are we going to see more foldables out in the market? And kind of what does that do for MPoC acceptance? We only have a short amount of time, so foldables, fad or not? Let's do it, I don't know, let's do a fist if it's a fad and a 5 if it's not a fad. I'm going to say it's a fad.
Not bad.
I think, no, not a fad, basically.
Not a fad.
Yeah.
Okay. And so do we think it has any impact on MPoC at all?
The foldables?
The foldables, yeah.
I don't really think so.
I can think of one foldable that have 2 screens, which might impact developing an MPoC solution.
Yep.
It's a bigger versions of a phone than a smaller version of a tablet. So really, I think there is some impact on the usabilities, but how would it impact the securities and everything else? I don't think so.
Okay, interesting. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Hopefully, you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Please thank my panelists. They've given a great amount of content and information here, so please provide some thanks. And
Thanks.
Thank you all for being here and listening to us.